Hello, ladies, gentlemen, wonderful people of the internet, and all my favorite Habibis.
What is up, people? How's it going?
What are we going to talk about today, Mr. Sid?
Well, I think you folks can see it down in the description already, but I'm still gonna say it again and again because why not? Generalist versus specialist. Why should you be a generalist? Why should you not be a generalist? Why should you be a specialist? Why should you not be a specialist? And is it better to be any of these?
The Swiss Army knife versus the hammer.
I like that comparison. Alright, so we're gonna talk about that, but before that, hit the like button and push it. Hit the bell icon as well. Martin, roll the intro.
Follow your passion might be a perfect question to ask and might have a perfect answer when interpreted right.
Let's start tracking which stocks can actually go up and go down, or which stocks have an advantage with the vaccine coming out.
Why it would have been more expensive to fake a moon landing back in those days. It's quite an interesting video to watch.
The economic activity created from the App Store alone is worth $500 billion.
So let's move on to the next question.
Man, it was too easy.
Too easy, no? Why didn't you answer? Alright, guys. There's a mic here. So, quickly.
That came out of nowhere.
Yes. So, quickly, what we're going to do today. I know the traditional generalists versus specialists, the debate has always been there, a comparison table, and then one of them will be like, okay, go be a generalist or be a specialist. In this video or in this session, and I've done a lot of research on this subject. So, Sid, first of all, do you identify yourself as a generalist or a specialist?
Generalist.
Okay, interesting. Why not a specialist?
Because I've never been.
You want to be the Swiss Army knife? Huh?
I want to be the Swiss Army knife. I want to be the jack of all trades. I want to get to the point when I'm a king of all trades, but that's extremely hard. But I like getting my hands dirty in a lot of different things, which is why I like being a generalist.
Right. In fact, there's in fact a lot of resources outside where, in fact, there are books written about range and all of these books where they keep talking about how being a generalist is super awesome. It's super great. But one thing that I've noticed when any of these books or resources that talk about generalists, one thing that they mention is the idea of cherry picking anecdotes.
Okay. Before that, what do you identify as?
Well, that's a good point. And that's where I want to take this entire conversation to. It's not just going to be a generalist versus specialist.
Okay.
In different parts of my life, I want to identify myself as different people.
Okay.
I'll tell you why that's very important. It's not about just being a Swiss Army knife or being a hammer for the rest of your life. Right? If you just start taking cherry-picked anecdotes, okay, Tiger Woods aise tha, Roger Federer aise tha, and then you take those examples and you be like, because Roger Federer is like that, you should be a journalist, or because Thomas Young was like that, or Benjamin Franklin was in such a way, and you choose a certain path, you're not exploring again, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
And when I said I want to do it in a timeline, what I mean is it's going to be more like a pyramid or a step.
Okay.
And so let's not beat around the bush. Let's just get into the topic. The first thing that I feel that everyone needs to be is to have a generalist mindset when they start their careers, at least at the start of their careers.
Can't agree more.
What do you think is a generalist mindset?
I think it's a lot to do about being open to stuff that you might not have tried. I mean, see, the thing is, we have two different kinds of things that we do in any kind of job that you sort of take up. There's things that you like doing and there's things that you don't like doing.
Okay.
And even in things that you don't, the things that you like, it's sorted. You don't even have to think about it because you like doing them. You anyways have the motivation to actually go do them. But when you talk about things that you don't like doing them, there are two categories over there as well. Number one is things that you have tried and you did not like. And number two is things that you did not try and you think you won't like about it. Now the first category is fine. You've tried it, you did not like it, then you have clarity over there, which is the most important thing over here. You have clarity that it's not your thing. But the second thing that we are speaking about, which is things that you have not tried, but you think you're not going to like it. Those are the things that you have to be open to if you really want to grow as a generalist. Because The most important quality over there of being a generalist is to put yourself and take that deep dive and sort of explore something that is completely unknown to you and test the waters over there before sort of coming to a judgment on whether this is for me or this is not for me, and so on and so on. So
Right.
that's the biggest mindset thing that I feel is that.
I think that mindset comes in where we are forced to specialize since an early age. It comes from our school days.
Yeah.
What happens in our school days is we have 30 people in a classroom, or we have 6 different sections, 180 people, and they're all, studying the same subjects, right? And eventually, once you start specializing, you start to focus even further. So there's 30 people who are all studying computer science,
Right.
or there's 30 people who are all studying biology. What you're optimizing then is having many people study one topic,
Right.
which is exactly not what the market wants.
Yeah.
What the market wants is they want different skills and individual people to handle those skills, right? They don't want the supply demand is off there.
There's a whole disconnect between the way the Indian education system is.
It's
and-
all over the world.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing. We are just
if
pointing
you,
it
if
out.
you look at the things in the world, like for example, in places like the United States of America, where there is liberal arts education,
Yes.
people still have the freedom of choice over there in choosing their majors.
Exactly.
Whereas in India, right out of high school, a kid is expected to know what they want to do, which is ridiculous on all
The concept
levels.
of electives.
Yeah, exactly. The concept of electives.
You can be an astrophysicist. You can also be studying baking. You can also be studying English literature.
Exactly.
So that's the point. What I'm saying. So they then become so specialized, right? Or they're optimizing for the rest of the world. The supply demand is a lot different there. Whereas in India, for example, all the people, they all study the same thing for that one job or for that one skill.
Yeah.
So that's where it's kind of off, and that's where I feel for those of you who are probably still in school and college, even if you are getting a particular curriculum, you need to explore beyond that. That's the school aspect of it. Another thing I feel why it helps to be a generalist is because of how quickly you can learn.
Okay.
Generalists by default are the curious ones,
Right.
or maybe the bored ones, right? They get bored really easily. Or for example, when you mentioned, okay, I'm stuck in one particular way, it's probably because they maybe are curious about other things. Like I'm pretty sure they want to know, hey, how do you cook an omelette? Or how do you treat a person when they fell on the floor? But they never explore those curiosities because they feel like I don't need to know that, someone else will do it for me. Or I don't need to do that because that's not important because I'm supposed to sit and, design graphics.
Right.
That's not my job. Right? Whereas a generalist, for example, he is curious and he is willing to explore those curiosities.
Right. For sure.
Especially when you're starting off your career, by putting those biases towards your curiosity, that can in fact inhibit your growth.
The way I sort of see generalist is I keep using this analogy again and again in a lot of different places. And even when I speak about the liberal arts education system where there's like electives and stuff like that, think of it like a buffet where you have different kinds of items. Okay, so you have your tandoori chicken over here,
Yeah.
you have your Italian pasta over here, you have your Turkish Alfam chicken over here. Elson's mouth is already watering.
Right?
Elson probably misses the stuff in Dubai that he used to eat, shawarma and stuff like that.
Yes.
But essentially, I'm not forced to just go take a tandoori chicken or a paneer or something like that. I can go pick a little bit of everything I want.
Yep.
I can try out everything, and if I really like something, I can double down on that. I can be like, okay, I want more of this. And being a generalist, I feel that's one of the biggest advantages you have because you get to try out, especially in the young stages. I'm not at all talking about being a generalist in your 30s, 40s or something because I can't. I'm 25 years old and that's all the experience that I have. But for those of you in your 20s, which is probably the majority of the folks who are watching this, being a generalist can be extremely advantageous in your early 20s because of the fact that you get to really try and pick and choose from the buffet so that you have a platter. You have a platter. You have an array of tastes in your
Sample.
mouth.
You can
a
sample.
sample. And you can finally choose what exactly you want to. And that gives you a clarity of choice than any other thing like reading a book or reading a blog or listening to an influencer say that this is what you have to do and stuff like that. You get to make a choice for yourself.
You mentioned how probably after your 30s and 40s, you're not going to be a journalist. I'm going to change your mind there. I feel there's another, like when I mentioned the time lapse, I feel that will come in a different way. Not exactly the same way, but slightly different. I'll say how, that's what I feel. This is again my theory. but I don't know if it's true or not. You can
Okay.
probably
Go for it.
validate it.
Go for it.
So the first thing that we did is, okay, we said about generalists and other things where they are really good learners. One is they have this thing called the synaptic plasticity, analogical thinking. If I have, for example, I use this example. When I studied dentistry, for doing our third molar extractions, we used to use a chisel and a mallet. When I later on tried to pick up a little bit of carpentry and woodworking on the side, I noticed that the techniques that he used were exactly similar. Using the chisel and mallet, knowing the different types of joints, knowing the bevels, the chamfer and all of that, they were exact same thing,
Okay, interesting.
right? And because I knew that, I could pick it up really quickly. There were
Right.
things like a dovetail joint that we used in dentistry, in amalgam, which we also used in carpentry. In the same way, and I'm not just limiting it to it. So because your brain has already gone through that journey of learning something, putting it down into long-term memory, what happens is the next time when you come across something, you have that muscle memory, which you can use somewhere else. So
Right.
analogical thinking.
Right, interesting.
It also makes you very flexible, right? Because generalists, for example, have to learn, when they start learning these things in a very, I call it a wicked environment. It's the same thing that's mentioned in the Epstein book. Okay? A wicked environment is where, for example, the real world is a wicked environment. The rules are not really that clear. Or it's not that obvious. So you end up learning things from very varied places. If the students who I would say have only explored, the joints from one subject, if I have a slightly bigger advantage because I know the joints from another subject too.
Right. You basically have different pools of knowledge that you can sort of
Yes.
cumulatively connect the dots and take. in.
Exactly. And your learning becomes more solidified or your knowledge becomes more solidified when your learning is flexible.
I think one of the biggest things that this enables anyone to do is to connect the dots between different kinds of discipline that seem different, but the underlying rules are always kind of like similar to each of them.
That's what Mr. Elon Musk says. Think in first principles. Everything
right.
boils down to the same thing.
Right.
Right? He just uses a fancy word for it. Or that's what we learn in physics. So the end essence can be very similar. So think in first principles, boil everything down. And that's why you'll see a lot of journalists say, oh yeah, that's exactly like this.
Right.
That's exactly like this.
Yeah, it kind of makes your brain on a neuroscientific level. It probably makes your brain more neuroplastic because you again are more
Yes.
sort of getting your hands on different things. So your neurons are always like realigning themselves to learn something completely new, and there are so many different patterns that it has available for memory recollection as
Exactly.
well. So I think that gives
Yep.
more neuroplasticity
Exactly.
in the long run.
And another way that for those who are looking for something more of a practical way on how they can do it, like maybe it's not possible for everyone to go and become a carpenter and a dentist, but another way that you can really quickly do it is you can use the Pareto principle,
What's the Pareto principle?
the 80-20 rule, where you learn just the top 20 things which will give you 80% of the knowledge of that subject. Right? In every subject, there are those baseline things that you can learn.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not telling you to go deep into the effects. When you mention the sampling,
I think this is again the first principle thing. It's like if you learn the basic logics of a subject, then you can just use those as tools in order to crack down any kind of complex thing about that particular subject.
yeah, even if, for example, you're learning a particular subject, rather than go into the depth of it that maybe a specialist does, you just learn the basics.
Right.
Know the boundaries. Know what the subject is about. Right? The sampling.
Right. And if you actually look at, since I come from a physics background, if you actually look at any kind of physics, everything is sort of derived from this basic thing which we call as Newtonian physics, which is basically Newton's 3 laws of motion and gravity. We have these 4 things, gravity and Newton's 3 laws of motion. You sort of use these as the base cases and applying to astrophysics or quantum physics, it works brilliantly.
Right.
So everything, the starting point of that comes from these basic laws, and this is what everything sort of springs from. It's just that astro goes up and quantum goes down, and
Yeah.
Newton's physics is like the base of it.
Right. Yep. I want to now transition from a generalist to the next step of mine,
Okay.
which is called a specialized generalist.
Okay, that's interesting. What does that mean?
You see, being a generalist for a really long time, what a lot of people are going to tell you is that, bro, you're a jack of all trades, but you're a master of none.
Yeah,
Right.
constantly get that.
In fact, this whole term of jack of all trades comes from this, I don't know if you know about this, it's Robert Greene, and he was one of Shakespeare's competitors.
Oh.
Okay, they were contemporaries, and Shakespeare was initially an actor. Right? He was an actor, not a very successful actor, so he went on to become a playwright. And Robert Greene was a playwright, and he was like, dude, what is this guy? He's jack of all trades, master of none. सब कुछ try कर रहा है, उसको कुछ आता नहीं.
Right.
But what happened to Shakespeare is a completely different story.
Yeah, I don't even know who John Green was.
Robert Greene.
Robert.
Right? This is not the other Robert Greene that you guys probably know from the author. This is another Robert Greene. He's also an author, but exactly nobody knows about him, and Shakespeare's gone all the way up.
Yeah.
But not all of us are that lucky, right? In fact, when you start dabbling into a lot of things, what a lot of people will be like, dude, this guy's not fixing, he's not concentrated, he's just, vicariously moving everywhere. There's a problem with that. It's the way people perceive things. And there's something called the halo effect or the anti-halo effect.
Okay.
The halo effect is really good. For example, if you have done something and you're really good at it, because you have done that thing really well, whenever you get a new task, people will assume that, hey, because he's done that really well, he's probably good at all of these other things too.
Okay.
Right? The anti-halo effect works in the opposite.
Because you've done this, everyone else thinks you're shit at everything else?
No, because you're not that great at that, they'll assume that you're not great at all the other things too.
Interesting.
Right? You are okay at designing. You know how to use Photoshop. But you're not the best Photoshop designer. So probably his writing is also not that great. Right? Probably his scale skills are also not that great.
Right, makes sense.
Maybe he is good. Maybe he's better than a lot of people.
How does what I really want to know is how does the concept of a generalized specialist
A specialized generalist.
specialized generalist come into play here?
So the point is, and you have had that sampling period.
Right.
After you find that sampling period, you'll understand. Biryani you'll get from that platter. And you'll be like, okay, let me have a little bit of biryani today. And you start eating that biryani. And you decide, okay, I want to stick with this. You have identified your match quality. You understand what is it that I want to pursue.
Right.
Now you might be like, hey, the story's over. Elson, can we shut the live stream? No. It goes on.
Okay.
Right? You have identified that one thing that is match quality. That is a thing. And the way I identify it as, you will be able to identify it that you have achieved match quality if you can provide value to the world. A quick proxy for value is money. If you can monetize your skill, then you have understood that, hey, I am a specialized generalist there. I've specialized on that one skill. I'm good at it.
But how does that become a specialized generalist? I don't.
Because
get
you're a
that
generalist, you have
So I
sampled
started
everything.
out as a generalist,
Yes.
but then so doesn't that still make me a specialist? Because eventually I started out as a generalist, but I transitioned into a specialist because I found what dish I want to
So,
indulge in.
on the outside, you want to look like a specialist. But on the inside, you can still be a generalist.
Like that.
Right.
Okay, like
on
you can
the
still have
outside, on your website, it could be
You're talking about a mindset level, I feel.
more in terms of how you present yourself. On my website or on my, if you're a content creator, and one day you're talking about marketing, and you're going on and on about marketing. Suddenly you transition and you talk about philosophy. Suddenly you transition and talk about design. It just introduces a lot of cognitive dissonance. And the people are like, "Yeah, what is this guy doing?" So I would say, if you're really good at marketing and you've established that the world wants to know your marketing knowledge, there's value that's being provided, you double down on that and you become a specialist there. Inside, you could still be very explorative.
Okay.
And you have already done those things. Right? So the point what I want to basically say is, you can't just keep dabbling all your life. Don't try to always just keep going like this. The point is, you sample it and finally you choose one and you go a little bit in depth of that. Then we'll come back to being a journalist, so don't worry.
Okay.
Okay, once you have chosen this one thing that you're really good at, I would say go through the third phase, which is being a proper specialist at it.
Okay.
Put in your 10,000 hours, as Malcolm Gladwell puts it. You can be an expert at something only if you put 10,000 hours to it. So you keep going day in and day out. Now, for example, if you're a designer and you have identified yourself that I want to be a designer, go so deep into it that you explore all the features of design. You become a graphic designer, you become a visual artist, you learn a little bit of photography, you learn a little bit of video,
So
you learn
basically
about
you're
lighting.
talking about this whole thing in a very broad 20-30 year sense where you're like, hey, initially start off as a journalist, try all the platters and then take a little bit of biryani, enjoy your chicken biryani, eat that chicken out, and then finally when
Understand how that chicken biryani is made.
smell
Break
the
it down.
aroma and stuff like
Exactly. Break that chicken biryani down.
that. Yeah.
Peel it off.
And then finally move on to the next part, which is probably like a pasta or something like that. When does pasta come in? When do I decide that here? okay, I'm done with biryani. Does that at all happen? Ki, hey, I'm done with eating chicken biryani. I want to go back. I want to
Yes.
try pasta and I want to have more pasta.
I will give you your pasta. So once you have gone through those 10,000 hours of specialization, comes the last step,
Okay.
which is where you become a generalized specialist. Okay, I'll explain. I'll explain what that means.
Okay.
You see, there's this concept called the Einstein Effect.
Okay.
Okay. Let's do this in live. Let's try a live experiment.
Okay.
Okay. I give you a matchbox
Okay. I have
with
a
matches
matchbox.
in it. There's a matchbox.
Okay.
There's matches in it, and I give you a candle, and I give you a wall here.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. And I'm like, stick this candle on the wall.
Okay.
How would you do that?
I would light this,
Okay.
and I would light the base.
Okay.
I would stick it.
Right. Thank you for that. So the experiment worked. You see, that's one way to go about it.
Okay.
The other way is to remove all the matches, take the box, stick the box on the wall
How do I stick the box on the wall?
with the candle, with the wax or whatever.
Okay.
Stick the candle in the box or whatever, and then place the candle over it.
Okay.
Because if you just keep a candle like this, because it's standing out, it'll fall.
But then my wall is going to get spoiled.
You're beating the purpose of it, right? So this is the
Okay.
famous candle
Yeah, I'll
experiment.
play along.
This is the famous candle experiment, and it's called the Einstein Effect, where they say that once you have gone into a learned path, you usually use that same thinking always. You
Okay.
can't broaden your thinking.
It's kind of like thinking out of the box.
Exactly.
Kind of, thing.
Boxing, right?
Literally.
So the point is to start thinking out of the box and looking at every problem like a novice, right? And that's where again the generalist comes in,
Right.
because he looks at things in a very broader perspective. He's able to zoom out, right? Whereas the specialist is way tunnel focused. So eventually, that's when you realize I'm the best at designing. But how can I become a really good designer? And these examples that I'm using, it's from so many resources. This last one is something called a multiplier. You can be a really good designer, and now you can multiply your journey or your career by certain multipliers. For example, if the usual best multipliers to use, one is public speaking, one is writing, and one is negotiation.
Right.
If you master these three skills as multipliers, they are a very good add-on to your designing career.
Can you repeat those three things?
Negotiation, public speaking, and writing.
Why writing? Negotiation and public speaking, I get it. It helps you put out there and it helps you crack deals. Writing, why?
You don't feel that?
I know. I'm just asking why.
For the same reason. I mean, you are able to articulate your thoughts better. For example, I feel, and writing it's so pervasive, right? It can be anything from copywriting in an ad, for example, or even if you want to write a blog or a newsletter, whatever.
Makes sense.
Right? You need to be able to articulate those thoughts. It's great that you read a lot of things, but eventually you need to write that too.
Right.
Because that's one of the ways that people consume your knowledge. And these are multipliers, but one thing that I mean when or I feel that being a generalist has another disadvantage is, or even a specialist, is that you need to understand that the world is moving. A lot of the skills that are relevant today may not be relevant 50 years from now. Right? So have that also in your head.
Basically, the whole adaptability thing, wherein you got to be ready to unlearn things.
Yep. That too, and understand that, okay, even if I'm learning these skills, don't take it too seriously. Don't be like, okay, I've set this skill in stone, now I'm set forever.
So, Elson, so far we've really sort of dived very deep into why you should be a generalist, because it might lead you to be a specialized generalist and so on. But what do you think are the advantages of being just a specialist? Like, for example, let's say right after school, I'm like, I want to be a coder, or I want to be a filmmaker, and I just did that. I did not even explore anything else. What are the pros of that?
The obvious pro is you can make a lot of money faster.
Yeah, for
Right? Because the world gives you money in terms of, number one, the level of skill that you have. How much in demand is that skill in the market, right? And how irreplaceable you are. If you're such a specialized person that you know everything about it, you're the master of it, you're an expert, you tick all those three categories. Whereas generalists, on the other hand, are very easily replaceable.
Okay.
If you're just dabbling with a lot of skills, you're good at a lot of things, which is great if you're like a startup entrepreneur.
Right,
Right?
but
If
as
you're-
the company scales and if the company
especially
gets
in a
more
corporate, it doesn't make sense.
money, yeah,
You'll be easily out.
because it has money and you'd rather have 6 different people doing one
Exactly.
task rather than one person doing 6 different
Exactly.
tasks.
So that is one obvious advantage of being a specialist. I'll give you another example. Take the example of a clinic. Okay, you have a receptionist, you have a bookkeeper, you have a phlebotomist, you have a general dentist,
What's a phlebotomist?
the person who does your blood smear and all of that.
I don't even know what plus fair is. But
Okay.
Go on.
Then you have your, say, the specialist surgeon.
Okay.
Okay. Now, when you have all of this, the question is, okay, who's the most replaceable here? Who is the most replaceable? For me, if you look at it,
The surgeon is definitely not the most replaceable.
he is a specialist.
Yeah, he's a full-time specialist.
The general dentist is a generalist,
Yeah.
right? He or she may look at radiology, the X-rays. He or she may also look at how to do extractions, cleaning, scaling, everything. And then, so he's a generalist, he or she, right?
Yeah.
And the third person is a receptionist with bookkeeper, right? You have
They are
separate-
very replaceable.
They are also specialists, though,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So now the question is, who is most replaceable? The idea is that these guys down there, their job is very
Monotonous?
repeatable.
Exactly.
It's pattern,
Yeah.
right? It's a pattern, and that is something. Patterns are something that an AI can easily replicate, right? So whatever you choose, understand that. If you are taking a particular career right now, right? If you're opting for it, try and see, is this something that an AI can easily replicate?
Can you name like 3 careers that can be replicated by AI?
I mean, there's so much, right? Personally, like we use tools like Headline and copywriting.
Content, right? So I could lose my job basically.
The second one is, I remember my first freelance gig. I had no skills back then. I remember it was on freelancer.com, and the job that I got, I was able to convince the guy. It was transcribing 4 videos, and they were like 1 hour long videos, and I had to basically just sit and type it down. I got paid 1,500 for that. 4 hours of just listening and typing, listening and typing, listening and typing. Today we get to do that in like 15.
Yeah, we have
15
what's
minutes.
that thing called?
Descript.
Descript.
In 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? Now those you might be like, hey, that's so easy, right? Or, hey, else and you're giving the obvious answers, right? The point is, find 1 or 2 skills and combine them. The benefit of being a generalist is this idea of combinatorial thinking.
So you're basically
So even though you said, hey, I'm a content writer, I'm easily replaceable, I wouldn't say that's true. Because you have 2 to 3 really strong skills. And your content writing is complemented by your other skill too. Right? And you have found now a separate niche.
right. So I've become a generalized specialized generalist.
Yeah. A generalized
Interesting. I'm
specialist.
finally
You
starting
found
to
a
get a hang
generalized
of this.
specialist. So the idea is, most people say it's like a T, right? Become a T, get a lot of breadth in all of these things, and then find a depth in one. The idea is not to do that. The idea is you'll have multiple intersections.
Right.
You don't just
Right.
go deep into one.
So essentially, what we're concluding at is basically the fact that don't be just one thing. Sort of maybe start out by being a generalist because it gives you much more options, and then sort of. I mean, I can't even say that's
Am
the
I
actual
complicating?
conclusion.
Did you get complicated?
I didn't get complicated. I'm just not sure on what note to sort of finalize this.
I will tell.
Yeah.
The simple way I can put it is, if you're curious about something, explore that. Simple.
Fair enough.
Explore that. If you're really good at it, continue with that. Maybe persevere. Continue with that. And even if you're really good at that, know that there could be other things also where you can be good at.
Right. So in short, have a generalist mindset and keep exploring, and when you find that thing, specialize on that
Yeah.
and still have that generalist mindset.
It's like you find islands
Yeah.
and then you try to connect those islands with bridges.
And you form a city.
All right, guys, like, share, and subscribe. Bye-bye.
That was so quick.
Awesome. Cool. So, yeah, man, do the, what is it called? The
Hit the bell icon, guys. because
If you
we'll
guys
be
liked
back.
it, and there are some really awesome journalists. One second. There are some really awesome journalists that you guys should read about. Who are your favorite journalists, though, from the past?
That's a good question.
I mean, okay, there's Leonardo da Vinci, there's Benjamin Franklin.
I like. Oh, like those kind of folks.
Yeah.
Those kind of folks. I like Steve Jobs a lot.
Okay.
I feel that he's done. I'm very inspired by Steve Jobs. I've like really followed in. I know it's very cliche, but I have followed his journey in like making Apple and how he came into Pixar after sort of getting fired from Apple. There's this amazing documentary called The Pixar Story.
Yep.
I also have read about his spiritual journey, about a guru and his whole
Yogi.
relationship with Zen and meditation and stuff like that. So Steve Jobs is a generalist that I really, really, really look up to.
While I was doing some research, I found about these. One was a doctor called Dr. Thomas Young, and I spoke about that. I reached out to you about that. So Dr. Thomas Young, you guys probably know the same guy who has come up with the Young's modulus, the double slit experiment, so many things. His story is really beautiful because he's actually a physician. He's a doctor, so he's a physician and a physicist, and he's known as the last man who knew everything.
Okay.
That's in fact his biography. He's also known as the last polymath.
Oh, okay.
Okay. His story is interesting because he started off as a dancer, and then he went on to, I think, studying a little bit of theology. Then he took up medicine. While he was studying medicine, back then there were not enough cadavers, right? So what they had to do is they would go and they dig up cadavers from the grave.
Okay.
While he was doing that, he started analyzing eyes. Okay, and that's when he realized about the eye musculature and the whole idea of power of accommodation. And most of the things that he's worked on in physics also, like the double slit experiment and all of that, they're all related slightly to the eyes.
Oh yeah.
Right? So that's how he was able to, bridge things based on his knowledge. Another example is Robert Hooke, right? Hooke's law, the spring and all of that. Robert Hooke is also the same guy who discovered the cell. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like in biology, and I remember, for me it was hard to remember these guys when I was studying, right? Because we had to study bio, we had to study physics, and the same names would come, so it used to get confusing.
There's even Marie Curie, who is the only person to win 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different disciplines. She won a Nobel Prize in physics and chemistry.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of cool people, and it's inspiring when you read their stories. They're all called the Renaissance men,
Oh,
right? In fact, Robert Hooke is called the Leonardo da Vinci of England.
okay.
So it's beautiful to learn, and these are the people that I get inspired, make me want to be like them. So yeah, guys, all the best. Hope you all also become future Da Vinci's, Benjamin Franklin's, Robert Hooke's, Thomas Young's, Marie Curie's, and all of that. Steve Jobs. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Who your favorite generalists or specialists are?
Yeah, put that down right away. And we'll be back with another episode next time. And don't forget to hit the bell icon because I just like doing this.